Adolf Hitler's legacy continues to present hard questions. How to ensure that no one forgets and yet ensure no one glorifies the memories of him and the horrific crimes he ordered. Austria is proof of how hard answers can be to find. Members of a commission looking into the fate of Adolf Hitler's house of birth are denying that they recommended that the building be demolished. A spokesperson for the commission said demolishing the house in the town of Braunau am Inn, near the border with Germany, would amount to denying Austria's Nazi past. Now, the property is currently privately owned and is often the focus of neo-Nazi pilgrimages. The country's interior minister has also backpedaled on his recommendation to demolish the building. He now says an architectural competition will be held to determine the future of the building. Hard questions indeed. I'm joined now here at the big table by Professor Arndt Bauer-Kempfer. He's from the Free University here in Berlin. He is one of Germany's most respected voices on collective memory. One of his courses at the FU focuses on how societies remember their past. Professor, it's good to have you with us. The house in which Hitler was born, tear it down, some people say. Is that erasing or denying the past?
I mean, in general, I'm in favor of preserving, these kind of buildings in order to reconstruct them as kind of monuments and placing them into kind of critical context and explaining to the spectators what this house meant, really.
Why hasn't that been done earlier, though? I mean, it seems, as an outsider, if you're looking at this story, a lot of people may seem to be shocked that this hasn't been done sooner.
Well, the trouble is, of course, that some neo-Nazis have assembled there, have gathered there, and had made this as a kind of site of pilgrimage, and have misused this house in order to get their message across. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we have this problem, I think there is possibly no other way of just raising it. But this is an exception. I mean, in general, I think we should preserve these monuments.
A lot of people have been talking about this on social media. We want to take a look at the reaction on social media, diverse reactions, indeed, on Twitter to the announcement that Hitler's house is going to be demolished. The Dundee-based academic Anna Notaro questions the decision, saying that it is silly indeed. Do they think that by destroying the house, they erase the past? German user Vanessa Geig approves of the decision. She writes, I don't understand what value Hitler's birthplace could have apart from being a Nazi shrine. I mean, there you see the hashtag Hitler House. Professor, Austria has certainly been criticized for not owning up to its culpability in the Nazi past compared with Germany. Is that conflict, that inner conflict, is it on display tonight with this controversy?
Yes, to some extent. I mean, Austria has seen themselves as a kind of first victims. The Austrians have seen themselves as a kind of first victims of Nazism. And of course, this was an apologetic interpretation, apologetic view. Mm-hmm. And this was, of course, part of the story of denying, guilt and responsibility. But this has changed since the 1980s because we had this hot debate on the Waldheim case.
Yeah. But what utility, I guess, picking up on that last tweet we looked at, what utility is there to do anything with Adolf Hitler's birth home? Help us, if you would. What would a museum or what would it look like? I mean, the fact is, what would you tell there more than this is where he was born?
I mean, one way of dealing with it would be just to reconstruct the house a little bit, and to kind of put in a distance to this, mm-hmm. Different culture, and even reconstructing the architecture a little bit, in order to create distance to this, and then as regards the rooms of the house, of course, this can be reconstructed too, and then of course we can have an exposition, in this house and show, of course, what this meant to the Austrians and what this meant to Germany and to the world in the end.
So make it a place of learning.
Yes.
Okay. Professor, stand by. The story continues tonight. Germany is remembering one of its darkest days. It was 75 years ago that the first train departed from Berlin's Track 17. Its passengers were German Jews. By the war's end, Track 17 had become the door to death for thousands of Jews in Berlin. We have this report.
Track 17 at Berlin-Grunewald Station. It was from here 75 years ago that thousands of Jews were sent to their death. Today, the train station is a place that is supposed to commemorate those who suffered from the horrors of the Nazis. On October 18, 1941, the first so-called Osttransport left Track 17 in the direction of Łódź, toward uncertainty and eventually destruction. Horst Selbiger knew many people who were transported away from here, friends and family members. He himself was lucky not to have been deported.
Gleis 17 ist für mich.
For me, Track 17 is basically the Berlin train station where all suffering originated.
Von dem alles Leid ausging. Ich denke, es ist gut, dass es
I think it's good that this rail connection exists and that people can see when the transports left and with how many people. We were practically carted off toward annihilation by the German railway, the Reichsbahn at the time.
Gekarrt wurden von der Deutschen Bahn, damals Reichsbahn.
Meticulously planned by the Nazis, the systematic deportation of the Jews from Germany began 75 years ago. The death camps in the east were the final destinations. The first transport from Berlin went to Łódź, known as Litzmannstadt during the Nazi era. 1,089 innocent Jewish people were abducted and taken away. Horst Selbiger will give a commemorative speech in Berlin at Track 17. To prepare for it, he spent 5 days in the Polish city of Łódź and viewed the camp there.
Da sind all diese Dinge. Es ist unwahrscheinlich mit
And while I was there,
Brutalität und
all these things came up again.
ja, diese Nazis gehaust haben.
It's incredible with what brutality these Nazis quartered and gassed people who were completely innocent.
Völlig unschuldig waren. Aber wir Kinder haben spätestens 41
But we
gewusst,
kids
dass es
knew by 1941 at the latest
Juden
that Jews were being exterminated.
wie
Exterminated like vermin.
Selbiger was born in Berlin in 1928. He was regarded as a half-Jew, was made to wear a yellow badge, and was forced into hard labor as a child. He and his parents barely escaped deportation. Selbiger frequently shares the story of his fate with the public.
Es ist einfach so, es sind, ich sagte es schon, 61 Selbiger
It's just that 61 members of my family were deported and killed.
Eine ganz liebe Freundin von mir, meine erste
And my
Liebe,
first love was taken.
deportiert worden. Und all diese
And
Menschen
all these people cry out, tell our story.
und deshalb
That's
wird
why I
es
see this as my
meine
duty.
Aufgabe.
Selbiger then explains how he often dreams of a class reunion, one that takes place right on Track 17. Here, from the very spot the Nazis drove most of his Jewish classmates to their deaths.
All right, Professor Bauer-Kempfer is here at the big table with us. Professor, Track 17, is it an example of successfully claiming the past and putting it to good use for the future?
I think it is, because, I mean, 50,000 Jews were deported from the station, Grunewald station in Berlin. And what this kind of memorial does is really, it draws the spectators into the fate of the individuals, of groups, of the trains, and the people in the trains that were deported from Grunewald. So
But it's not imposing. I mean, you and I were talking. We've both been there. We've seen it.
Yeah.
It's not in your face. It's very subtle. I mean, you see the pictures here.
It is.
Nature. No one cuts the grass or anything.
It's not imposing. But the point is, it has taken us very long, us Germans, fairly long, to do this. I mean, there was the first memorial plaque was in 1987, as late as 1987, and this, platform 17, that was really constructed in 1989 by German Rail. And German Rail, of course, was responsible to some extent, to a large extent, for these deportations because they were paid for this.
Well, yeah, the culpability of society is everywhere.
Sure. But what this monument really does is it draws you into the individual, if you like, life and loss of life. Yeah.
All right. Professor Bauer-Kemper from the Free University here in Berlin, thank you very much. These are difficult topics to talk about. We appreciate your insights.
It was a pleasure.